here we are once again, Brendan. How's your week been?
Oh, well, another exciting week. I'm getting very acquainted with the people at Migración down in Calle CN with 15, but I won't go into all of that because I'll bore you. It's about as complicated as the US presidential election right now.
Hopefully a little bit faster.
Well, who knows? Who knows? It might work to my advantage if it isn't. And how's everything down the south, as I call it, the deep south of Bogota?
Well, renovation's going well in the house. So you'll notice I'm back with my red background and my plants. The fish are settling in nicely. So, yeah, it's mainly positives,
And any truth to the rumours that the Ollie Pritchard Zoo is going to be open to the public in the coming weeks?
Well, that depends on COVID restrictions, I suppose. At least that's what I'm going to say legally.
Okay. We'll look into that. December, here we come. Anyway, Ollie, we'll crack on with what we've got on week 11 of our show. And on Colombia's only live and interactive English language chat show, we're talking biking. Now, of the push bike variety, that is, here in Bogota. After being described as the cycling capital of death in a recent article in The Guardian, we discuss how bad or otherwise it actually is to move around this city on your bike. Do you cycle here? Do you find it relatively safe? Or was The Guardian right with its take on things? Non-cyclists, do bike users get under your skin? Are they overly demanding as to what the city should do for them? Let us know your thoughts right now using the live comment facility. Or if you're watching this recorded, you can write to us via the medium on which you're viewing us, or send a tweet to @BogotaPost. We always like to hear from you. It's our news roundup first, though, and while security, or lack thereof, is a never-ending issue, we did have a couple of incidents over the last week that put insecurity at the top of the news cycle. Ollie, these were shocking incidents, and they provoked, I should say, a somewhat controversial reaction from our beloved Mayor Claudia Lopez.
That's right, Brendan. So, I mean, I think that the attack that caught the imagination of most people, there's been a couple on the Transmilenio, and the one that really got people's backs up was a man being stabbed at 10 in the morning. And I think, you know, there's a lot of tendencies in Colombia to blame people for attacks, and there's a lot of victim blaming. Sayings like "da papaya" obviously are very common here. And although I don't like those, that is victim blaming. There is part of it where you think sometimes, well, we do all try to be careful and to be secure and not to take risks. I think many people in Bogota do that. Whether it's morally right or not is neither here nor there. But how can you protect yourself efficiently if 10 in the morning on the Transmilenio isn't a safe place to be? That's not really on. And to have the mayor of the city wading in to say, you know, to be pushing the blame onto foreigners. And let's be honest, let's be quite clear about this. She says extranjeros. What she means is Venezuelans. That's a dog whistle. There's no doubt at all that when she says extranjeros, she doesn't mean people like you or me, Brendan. She's stoking up xenophobia against Venezuelans who are, frankly, as Migración Colombia were quick to point out, don't cause that much crime. I think you and I have both lived in Bogota for quite a while now, the best part of a decade each. Before this recent wave of Venezuelan migration, it wasn't like there was any less crime. In fact, there was more. We see quite a vulnerable sector of the population. I think as immigrants ourselves, I think it's something that it's a group that we feel more sympathy perhaps than others do. And yeah, I think those are just very unhelpful comments.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it never ceases to amaze how Colombians can say, "Oh, yeah, it's all the fault of the Venezuelans that are here when there's more crime, or they feel that there's the levels of crime are rising, and it's like it never existed before we saw this influx of Venezuelans over the last 3 to 4 years." And yeah, her comments to me, quite surprising for a mayor that I guess would describe herself as being very liberal. I mean, if it came from somebody from the Centro Democratico, you'd be kind of going, okay, that's par for the course.
Par for the course, yeah.
Exactly. But for Claudia Lopez, quite surprising and obviously not helpful. But as you said, fair play to Migración coming out the day after to the press with their director had a press conference and did, as you said, mention that the Venezuelans are not that culpable when it comes to the crime here. Of course, I guess what a lot of Colombians are equating poverty, and obviously there are a lot of poor Venezuelans here having to go around and they're selling plastic bags or whatever they can do to make a few pennies. They're equating that poverty with criminality, but of course they don't always go hand in hand. But yeah,
well, look, I mean, let's not pretend. You know, I mean, what's problematic about this, I think, is that. I mean, obviously, some Venezuelans do turn to crime, and nobody's denying that. But I think this ties in quite well with our topic of cycling tonight. If you look on Bogotá cycling groups, you'll see video after video that are kind of denouncing some robbery or another. And, it's so common. 5, 6, 7, 8 a day at least that will say, modo de ataco, blah, 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 arma blanca, yada, yada, yada. And then it will say, tres venezolanos. And you know what, Brendan? I never thought, when I've been held up at gunpoint here in Colombia, I've never thought to say, hey, guys, can I just have a quick look at your passports? Just... I'd much prefer to be robbed at gunpoint by honest, hard-working Colombians rather than these. I mean, it just seems bizarre to me why it would bother you. Surely the problem is they're going around nicking bikes, not, what their nationality is really such a, what else are we going to focus on? Their preference of trainer or whatever? I mean, it's just bizarre. I don't understand the need for that focus.
Yeah, interesting. You mentioned the Transmilenio where this stabbing occurred. I did see a headline last week that incidents of crime on the Transmilenio had decreased by 30% compared to last year. Now, of course, when you think there's probably it's only at 50% usage due to the pandemic, you kind of expect that. But then maybe because there are less people around, maybe that means also there's less security on it. Because you said this happened at 10 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, on a really busy normal week on the Transmilenio in a normal year.
And at a normal station. I mean, I think part of what makes this shocking is the station. This was at Calle 72. Now, without wanting to get too Bogotá regionalist with this, that's an area of the city that I think most people consider to be safe. It's certainly high profile. It's got a whiff of the Colmenares case to it here. If this had been, let's say, in an F station line, toward, past the Americas, Centro Comercial, would it have got the same reaction? That's a big question there.
I'd wager probably not. But on this general theme, both you and I were discussing, and you said another few people mentioned this, that we've noticed an increase in the number of police on the street, just doing the beats, which to me is rather strange, especially in kind of my neck of the woods up here in the far north, and in Barrio Santandercito and Verbenal. You generally see the police going around in their motos, but not walking. And I've seen in groups of 6 to 8 police just wandering around. Now, on one side of the coin, you kind of go, oh, that's nice. But then on the other occasion, sometimes you're wondering, well, I don't know if that's a problem or not. But interesting. So is there a general feeling that criminality, insecurity, all that is on the rise, or is this? Well, another assumption is that a few of them they looked rather young, so maybe they're training guys. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I do wonder if that's a thing. Putting people onto the military service, it's a nice way of subsidizing some families, because of course they do get paid for that service. It does seem to be all around. I mean, I'm very interested to note that it comes up where you live as well. I mean, I sometimes worry that I'm living in a bit of a foreigner bubble here, but certainly friends all around Teusaquillo, Chapinero. I was in the centre yesterday, yes, Wednesday. I mean, there were heavily, police with batons and shields at Las Aguas station. I mean, there's definitely a lot of police kicking around at the moment. And people seem to be reporting a fair degree of theft and attack.
Well, that's another thing as well. Like, I mean, a lot of people here just feel it's a waste of time reporting it. And now you can even do it online, or, well, you can, the last number of years, you can do it online if your mobile phone was stolen or whatever, your cedula, record it online just for your own insurance purposes and whatever, and records. But, I mean, nothing, you're not going to get it back. Nothing's really going to happen. So a lot of people maybe don't bother reporting things.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people don't try. I mean, I recall often one of my first times down in the Primero de Mayo, Quadripicha. And I was there with a group of friends, so I didn't know that well. I knew them fairly well. And one of them found a phone that had been dropped on the floor, picked it up, and I was thinking, fucking hell, I'm not really sure where I am or what's, how safe this area is. These people that I barely know, one of them now appears to be half-inching a phone. Why isn't he giving it to the cops? And so I asked about this, and of course they're like, well, if we give it to the cops, it's definitely been lost. Like, at the moment, this has fallen out of somebody's pocket, but they can still get it back if they ring us. Whereas if we give it to the cops, there's no way it's coming back. They'll definitely just take it, and it's a thing. And I remember thinking, well, that's a big difference. That's something I wouldn't expect a copper back home to be doing.
I wouldn't expect the An Garda Síochána, the name of the Irish police force, to be doing that either. But just to put on the record, Ollie, you are saying that there might be an element of kind of pocketing things for themselves amongst the police force here. I
mean, it's hard to believe, Brendan. It is very hard to believe, but because we're used to the armed forces and the police in Colombia being paragons of virtue, and talking about corruption in institutions such as these obviously is it's almost unheard of, but there are a few rotten apples. That's indeed I wrote an article.
Indeed, and all joking aside, I guess people will link this to the very poor pay that police officers get, that maybe if they received a better salary that they'd be less inclined to pocket a few things that might stumble into their CAIs or police stations, wherever they may be. But for sure, you can't really trust anything that you hand in. I mean, do they have any independent lost and found offices here? I don't think so.
I'm not sure. I mean, I suppose at the root of this is the fact that Colombia is fundamentally a low trust society in most ways. I mean, it has pockets of extreme trust, but it's fundamentally a low trust society, and that creates all kinds of trouble. I mean, again, let's say you set up a business, Brendan's, or like a charity, which did exactly that, an independent lost and found thing. I suspect people would simply ignore you. They just wouldn't believe that somebody would do the right thing.
Yeah, fair point. And obviously this is all linked to poverty. You can say poverty is at root and vast inequality, because it never ceases to amaze me the amount of times that people like Colombians who I may have just met a wet week, and they'll go, "Oh, by any chance have you got like 100,000 pesos that you can loan me?" And I go, well, of course I do, yeah. Like, why aren't they asking family or somebody that they know for the last a couple of years at least, but just not a guy that just walked into their life? But obviously, foreigner, dollar sign, euro sign, and
it can be that way, yeah.
Yeah, no, as you said, not always, but it does happen. By the way, we're talking insecurity in Bogota. Is it on the rise? Have you noticed more police officers on the beat in your barrios, whatever, do let us know. Is it happening in other parts of Colombia if you're listening in any other place?
Absolutely. I would be fascinated to know. And if you are writing in to tell us that there are more police, please tell us where you are. I'd be really interested to find out which barrios this is and isn't happening in.
Yeah, or maybe we're just putting 2 and 2 together and getting 5, and maybe it's just been like this for a long while and we haven't noticed. But Oli, 21st of November is coming up, and it's going to mark the anniversary of the big protest that we had last November that initiated or precipitated at least a few weeks of crazy incidents here in the
that was a bizarre time,
yeah, and in other cities as well. But this year, perhaps as a measure to take people's minds off it, they've decided to bring in a Dia Sin IVA, a VAT-free day. It could work if it's the government's plan to go, okay, let's have this day so people will forget about the anniversary of the protest. It might work in their favor, or it could go the complete opposite and turn into absolute chaos. It's a Saturday as well.
It seems like bizarre timing. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there haven't been any big marches planned yet for the 21st of November 2020. I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they were announced in the next, let's say, 2 weeks. But yes, absolutely. You'd have to think it's a Saturday, which means there could be a big turnout. It's the anniversary, could be a big turnout. There'll be a lot of people, obviously, marching in memory of Dylan Cruz, even though it won't be exactly 1 year. It'll be almost a year following that incident. You know, it's got the potential, and to have police sort of pulled away all over the shop, 2 shops, where there's going to be all, you know, these nonsense scenes. I mean, I think the Dia Sin IVA is a stupid move anyway. It just seems like a bizarre... You know, if IVA is necessary, it should be applied. If it's not necessary, then, you know, why don't get rid of it full stop? It's a really... I don't understand where Duque is going with this. It just seems to be a very counterproductive measure. Go on.
Well, just to say that a lot of the time as well, they say shops a few weeks before it or a few days before put the prices up anyway, and then they go, "Oh, look, you're getting this discount," when it's pretty much the same.
Classic.
Yeah, exactly. But go on. Sorry, I interrupted you there.
Well, I mean, I just think you know, it seems like a bizarre measure to take. Now, the government's hoping there'll be something like 5 billion extra in sales over that on the Saturday. And
I'll just add, Oli, and they'll be hoping there won't be 5 million extra cases of COVID-19 as well.
Well, yeah, that's exactly the thing, isn't it? And I think it's interesting that it's probably going to come in. Well, it'll be a little bit before the Black Friday nonsense. I don't know. They clearly want to get the economy stimulated. Is this the best way to do it? Let's wait and see. But it doesn't feel to me like a natural thing, and it's particularly galling when we're seeing the discussions over the minimum wage increase come up. Now, you know, people are pointing out that inflation still exists, even if the economy is depressed. Economists. 2% they're talking about in inflation. The workers' union is asking for 7% increase. It's a tough call.
Where do you stand on it? I mean, it's about, at the moment, just slightly south of 900,000 pesos, and then if you get your travel subsidy on top of that, it nearly brings it, about 1 million. Who said it earlier this year, or what was it, Duque himself or one minister, that, you know, that's more than enough for any family to live on?
Well, they got a lot of mocking for their calculations because they had to produce these bizarre calculations, and people said, I think what's fundamentally at the bottom of this, Brendan, is that I think a lot of people in Colombia really don't realize just how poor many people are in Colombia and exactly what they survive on. I say this to students every year, and it must come as a shock to them, but I say, you do realize there are lots of families living in Bogota on less than the minimum wage. And they say, no, profe, minimum wage is mínimo porque es lo mínimo. And I'm like, I'm genuinely not sure if they're being willfully obstinate or if they genuinely don't know that. But yeah, a lot of people in Colombia don't make the minimum wage. They'll get by on less than the minimum wage, and it's, people sort of say, well, can you rent an apartment for, 200,000 a month? Yes, you can. Go out far enough and you'll find, yes, absolutely you can. Now, you're going to have to share, and they're going to be potentially not very nice conditions to live under. But hello, that's the reality for a lot of people in Colombia. I find it really odd when they sort of say, I wonder what happens in some communities when they see these mocking tweets and Facebook messages and WhatsApp chains that are saying, oh, I can't believe people, how can they believe people would live on this much money? And there's a family thinking, we make a third of that and we survive. No, I'm not saying that's a particularly good thing as it goes. I think the minimum wage should go up. But when you give arguments like that, you tend to find that people like the Centro Democrático, who fight tooth and nail to avoid putting up the minimum wage, you tend to find their arguments are made a lot easier because they can just go, look at this. And I think what you need to be focusing that argument is not on can people live on this, but should people be forced to live on this?
Yeah, what's the standard of living? I mean, talking about getting a place that you can rent for, you could probably get a self-contained unit, maybe with two, or not self-contained, but an apartment, I'll call it, but I wouldn't classify it as an apartment, with 2 rooms in it as well, for 500,000. So it's got a kitchen and 2 rooms, so you can easily get a family into it.
So I actually looked this up in February when the latest round of complaint happened. So somebody said, look, it'd be impossible to get a room in Bogota for 200,000 a month. And I thought, I bet it's not. And I found within about 2 minutes of searching on Google, on Metro Cuadrado, whole bunch of listings, and that's on an internet site. I would imagine walking around a barrio and phoning numbers, you could probably drive that price down.
Yeah, like, look, there are certain standards that I guess you might be surprised at this, but there are certain standards I want to maintain. But like, I could go into Barrio Santandercito, for example, and into these relatively poorly constructed houses, and you get a basic room. You may not have access to the kitchen. I forget what do they call it in Spanish. You just get your room easily. Like easily, you'd rent it for 200,000 easily. But usually without a window as well. Like, I really can't understand how people can live in that. So as you said, maybe. Well,
that's the thing, yeah. But I mean, I think coming back to the minimum wage point, it's not a great look. The minimum wage, should it be high? Yeah, I would agree so. Should it raise in line with inflation? Well, yeah, absolutely. Anything above inflation is a good thing, frankly. So you would think that would be a positive, but there's a limit. I mean, it's going to be a tough sell to say, let's raise the minimum wage by 7%. At the same time, as we're seeing a lot of businesses go out of existence, we're seeing people that are already struggling to pay workers. It's surprising, I think.
And of course, that minimum wage, though, as well, then, Oli, is that not more obviously the formal sector? Because if you've got the informal sector, which is a huge sector here, people kind of pay what their employee will take, in a sense, how low they can go.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, and that's, I suppose, the other side of the coin. And actually, I do fear that legitimate employers will find it harder and harder. In the same way that, I get a lot of stick for standing up for taxi drivers. Now, I tend to find taxi drivers in Bogota, let's be honest, they're a bunch of ruffians. But I'll let you in on a secret, Brendan. I've been to many dozens and dozens of different countries in the world. Taxi drivers tend to be, basically thugs and criminals. Whether you're in the East End of London, or whether you're in downtown Dublin, or whether you're in Serbia or India, they tend to be the sort of people that like to chance it, like to rip people off, etc. That's, those people are naturally attracted to taxi driving. And
well, there goes our taxi drivers audience. Thanks for that.
but I would say, well, let's see if we can get it back now. I would say Bogota taxis, with those caveats, head and shoulders above any other city I've visited in my life. Head and shoulders. I would expect a cabbie in London to be trying to rip me off. I would be leaning forward. In the rare occasions I've bothered to take a taxi in London, you've had to be immediately straight onto the cabbie going, well, what are you doing? Why are you going down here? This isn't the quickest way. And yeah, I do find that taxi drivers here tend not to do that. But if you're a taxi driver in Bogota, how can you compete with Uber? You've got to at least nominally pay your taxes and function and do all these things. Uber just swans along, pays their drivers absolute dirt, and and avoids all the laws.
Yeah, well, I'm not a regular taxi user, which will come as no surprise to people who know me. But when I do have to use a taxi now, like Cabify, for example, that picks up the yellow taxis. So, and at least
that's fine. Yeah, I don't have a problem with that.
As well, so because I mean, I just had an incident which a guy who is an acquaintance taxi driver, and he did rip me off because I checked how much it should have been on the on the Cabify after I did it, because I thought I'll give him the money, I know him, and then I figure he charged me about 30% more than it should have been. Anyway, there you go. But yeah, so at least with Cabify you can use, and that's what I use. I don't tend to use Uber at all, to be honest. I have one taxi app on my phone, and it's Cabify, so it does go to the yellow taxi drivers. Oli, do you see that comment there? I
do. Yeah. So I mean, this is odd. $260. I mean, we don't earn dollars. I don't understand the point. Again, this is something that sort of amazes me when I see these arguments and when I hear these arguments. One of the things that continually baffles me is when people start shifting around. So one of the things that was a big deal, I think earlier this year or the end of last year, there was a meme going around saying that the Colombian minimum wage has fallen in dollar value because of changing exchange rates. Obviously, the dollar is so strong at the moment, doesn't buy very many dollars. And they were saying, so really you're worse off now than you were. I was thinking, but have these people been to school, is what I was thinking when I looked at that meme. And I thought, well, maybe the people that made the meme weren't, but then the people I saw sharing it, some of my students, colleagues of mine even. And this is just economic illiteracy at its worst. How many people on a minimum wage salary care what the exchange rate is fundamentally? I mean, that's very important if you're going on holiday. It's very important if you're buying lots of imported stuff. It's very important if your job is connected to the oil industry, but fundamentally those people don't tend to be, the price of rice in Colombia isn't really affected. In fact, if anything, it's often imported from America or Ecuador, so, better to have a better rate. So I find
I was going to say, just some people might use the argument that a strengthening dollar against the peso does mean that certain things become more expensive here for
oh yeah, no, look, it's terrible for me. Yeah, like the price of artisan beer goes up, the price of importing stuff goes up. You know, computers become more expensive, stuff like that. Yeah, okay, that's not great for me and my privileged lifestyle. But for somebody on minimum wage, that's absolutely not the same thing. You know, it's a bizarre metric to use, and again, I wonder that a lot of support or a lot of rejection of left-wing ideas, I think, comes from these bizarre arguments that they're so easy to pick up on quickly. And again, Jose Alfredo Franco Leon, you're saying this. I think you would be surprised what people survive on in Bogotá. And again, the question isn't about surviving. The question is, what's the wage that people should be living on? And that's often a very different thing. Can people survive on $260? Yeah, absolutely they can. I can't with my privileged lifestyle, but people can. And my proof for that, frankly, go to Ciudad Bolivar, and you can prove that very, very quickly. You will see families living on, I would say, 260,000 pesos a month. And if you don't believe that's true, just take the Transmi cable out there. You'll find that it is.
Yeah, and if you're too frightened to go there, you can come up here into Santandercito, and I know a lot of those people, and that's what they're on. And I'm not just saying that for the sake of this program. I mean, that is the fact of the matter. I know these people. I would rate them as friends. And I mean, if they're getting more than $1 million a month, well, it's on the odd month that they might be. They're very lucky. But anyway, Jose Alfredo, thanks for the comment. Indeed, a topic we'll probably come back to in another episode and give it more depth, because we do want to get on to our main topic tonight, which is cycling. But before we do that, just something quick, because it is important, Oli, for people who might be outside the country. That they've decided to do away with the need for the PCR test. From what I could gather, reading all the various Facebook expat groups and blah, 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 a lot of people found this a bit of a headache, the 96 hours, and they were confused by how it works. So I think a lot of people who want to come into the country would breathe a sigh of relief that it's being kicked to touch. But the Secretaría de Salud here in Bogotá is not a happy man.
Is this going to be the start of another clash between Claudia and Duque? Is this where we're going?
Well, it could well be, because, of course, it's back to this control of the airport. I must get in touch with my mate, Declan Ryan at Viva Air, to see what he makes of it, because I'm sure he's relatively happy, even though how many foreigners are coming in on Viva Air.
Well, I imagine he supports Avianca's position absolutely, doesn't he? I mean, he must be over the moon about that.
100%. Well, a rising tide lifts all boats, so I'm sure he's delighted if Avianca are doing well. Declan, let us know your thoughts. I'm sure you're listening.
I mean, I would say, in regards to this, it's a very sensible economic decision. Whether or not it's a problem in terms of health, that's another issue. But let's talk about, very quickly, xenophobia again, because we've already seen Colombian Twitter explode with lots of, foreigners are coming back spreading disease.
Okay.
Anyway, well, I mean, let's not necessarily open that, but that's already been one of the consequences.
I have to say I didn't read too many comments on that particular topic, but I can see where we go. It's why, in one sense, I'm slightly reluctant to go traveling around Colombia if my kind of visa situation was in a better place. Because I don't know the reaction in little towns. If they see a foreign face coming in, would they be worried? Now, from what I gather of people who have traveled, they're kind of going, no, there's no problem. They're happy to see you and things like that, especially in Villa de Leyva. I know a couple of Irish lads who've gone there in the last few weeks, and they say it's all very welcoming. But you would wonder, if the cases started to increase in the next few weeks, would people kind of go, oh, yeah, these foreigners coming in, spreading it around?
Yeah.
We'll see. Ali, is it worth mentioning, because I was going to say, like, they might think, especially some foreigners from the United States who might be anti-masks and kind of coronavirus conspiracy theorists, that they lump us all together in the same boat.
Well, there is, yeah, actually, I mean, that is a very real fear, yeah, definitely.
Because, yeah, speaking of the US, but we won't go into that. The US election has been done to death, only to say that it's looking
but it
like...
hasn't, has it? It's still going on. Anyway,
yeah. Cycling in Bogota, I know you love this topic. So as I mentioned in our introduction, and guys, do get in touch with us because it's been a hot topic the last week or 10 days. But you're more a regular cyclist. I acquired a bike in the last few weeks, and I used to have one a couple of years ago. And I do like cycling, but I tend to walk more than I cycle. But generally, you would be of the opinion, Oli, that this is a pretty decent city to cycle around.
Yeah, look, there's some bit, you know, again, it's like the taxi drivers. There's a lot of caveats to put into this. But I would say that generally speaking, yeah, Bogota is a pretty nice place to cycle around in. And actually it was relatively safe, I would say, relatively. Okay.
But why then, just in case people don't know, there were a couple of high-profile deaths in the last couple of weeks as well with this one horrible incident of a guy being, now this wasn't in Bogota per se, just outside, but
well, no, I think we can say that's Bogota, really.
Okay, but yeah, so he's pushed off a bridge by a driver. It's basically like obviously.
Yeah, well, I think we can use the word ran off a bridge. I mean, pushed off kind of gives it this thing, but yeah, somebody used a massive, 4-ton. Light van to shove off a cyclist. And I've spent enough time on a bicycle in my life. I used to be a courier, a bicycle messenger. I've cycled for years and years and years, especially in urban settings. Look, I'm not stupid. I know that lots of people don't like cyclists. Cars are just so dominant in society. I get it. Oh my God, I'm being inconvenienced by a cyclist. But Jesus Christ, if you're crossing into that line, that Clarkson-esque line of I'm actually going to ram a human being with my giant truck and push him to his death, you've just got to ask. And again, let's be under no illusions. This is, it's not a victimless crime, but it's very much a perpetratorless crime, because we've seen time and time again killing cyclists, killing pedestrians, even if they're little children. Country after country in the world, can be in Colombia or Ireland or the UK or Australia or wherever you like, don't have any justice. We had a case a couple of years ago of a man at Patios, an elderly man, 80 or so, got his pedals confused in the car, ploughed into a group of cyclists, killed one of them.
Nothing.
Oh, well, he made a mistake. Yeah, well, then he shouldn't have been in the bloody car in the first place. Look, I can't walk onto the streets with a gun and start randomly shooting around and then say, oh, sorry, it was just a mistake that I killed somebody. There's just no responsibility.
Yeah, I think certain people don't understand that when they get behind that wheel, no matter what.
No, hang on, wait. This is something I really, really want to counter, because this is an argument I've heard many times from many people. I don't think it is certain people.
I was going to say,
but I don't think it's certain people
driving a weapon.
No, but that's the thing. I don't think anybody does. I think there are no drivers that fully understand that. I think the vast majority of drivers, I don't think it's a few people, I think it's absolutely the grand majority of drivers do not understand the consequences, the potential consequences of their actions. And it doesn't matter how many videos they see, it doesn't matter how many crashes they're in. I genuinely don't think they have that in their head at all. I see nothing in my daily life that makes me think that any significant number of drivers genuinely care about people around them. if I'm being honest.
I mean, it's slightly off topic, but I think it's important just for what we're discussing right now, that there's just a lack of proper training. That we don't give enough training. It's kind of, we'll give a license, you take a few tests, do this, whatever, tick a few boxes.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You can do a 90-degree turn and blah blah blah, and there's your license. And then these people, they're okay. Younger people are associated with speed, but it's not just that. It's just anybody who they are driving this metal cage that can do a lot of damage. Like today, I did cycle down from where I am here on 174 down to 124 and left my bike at a friend's house. And I went on the Septima. Now, it was a wet morning, but I had a big blue luminous thing on me as well. So I was like an oversized Smurf, I should say, Tufo, cycling down. But the amount of times, spatial awareness, like I came very close to cars just like hitting me, weaving in and out, like it's bad driving anyway, the weaving in and out they're doing, but it was like I didn't exist. Now, I always say spatial awareness, I get this as a pedestrian. Sometimes you're walking on a busy street and there's like 4 Colombians in a line and they don't realize that you're actually trying to overtake them. Now, I say Colombians, but people, I should say, that they don't realize that there are people around that want to overtake them or whatever, and that they're holding up things. But this just lack of recognition that I existed on the road, I found it quite scary, because I cycled.
But again, I think you're making an error here. I don't think they did. I don't think it was a lack of recognition that you existed on the road. I think it's a lack of recognition that you are able to be on the road. I think they absolutely did see you, and they wanted to intimidate you by moving fast to get you to push away. And this happened to me every week as a bicycle messenger in London. I mean, I would be touched by a car about once a month. The cars in London, cars in Bogotá are nowhere near this aggressive. But cars in London, would come, taxis especially, would come close enough to me to make physical contact, to nudge me aside, to say, you should not be sharing this space. And yeah, no, absolutely. I don't think that's a lack of awareness at all.
Okay, well, I don't own a car now, but I did in my early 20s. In Ireland, and I'd like to think, I was in my early 20s, so again, that kind of high risk or category that's seen, at the high risk and those who take more chances than other drivers. But I like to think I always give cyclists the space required when I saw them on the road, and I wasn't revving up behind them or whatever. I like to think, maybe I'm incorrect on that, but that's how I recall it. So I don't get this mentality that, like, somebody would just kind of go, we'll have a bit of fun. I'm in a car, try and hit this cyclist. I don't think it's necessarily. That's it, but I don't think it's necessarily a bit of fun. It's a literal. Oh no, you should be somewhere else. You shouldn't be on my road. This is my road. I pay tax. You don't pay road tax. And you're going to go, no, we don't pay road tax because we don't damage the roads. Like, the roads in Bogotá are in absolute 2 and 8. And why are they in such a terrible state? Because there's no control about who's moving around on them. And, with the recent fad for driving enormous land violators everywhere, I mean, these are seriously big, heavy vehicles. They absolutely massacre cheap pavement, cheap asphalt, which, is what Bogotá is full of. And should those cars be paying for that road? Yeah, absolutely, they should. Do I impact that road? No. I'm less than 100 kilograms, including the bike. There's just no damage that I'm doing. It's insane. I think it's really sad. But coming back to the original point. Sorry, go on. Well, I was just going to say, it's kind of like if we go down in levels, but because... Okay, the car versus the pedestrian versus the cyclist, but then the cyclist versus the pedestrian, and at times, as I said, I walk more than I used to. That the cyclists don't always obey the traffic laws and the traffic lights and all that kind of stuff. So there's that side of it too. But were you going to make another point? Because I know we're going to get onto that.
No, but actually I'll address that because there's two things about this. I mean, we all saw the video a couple of years back, the A mí me gusta la adrenalina video of the guy hopping a red light on Calle 72 with Septima, famously not wearing a helmet, which is the worst thing in the world. How dare he put his own life at risk? I mean, again, it's this hypocrisy that gets me. I don't understand. Cars drive around cars regularly go through red lights. Stand by any junction in Bogota, go and stand there. You'll see a car go through a red light. And a car going through a red light has some serious consequences. It can happily kill somebody else. A cyclist going through a red light, mainly, the only person they're really going to damage is themselves, fundamentally, at the end of the day. And okay, well, that's their lookout, frankly. And that's why you tend to find cyclists don't tend to do things that are that risky, because they're very aware they might die.
Well, I will just add the point, unless it's at a pedestrian crossing where a pedestrian is walking out and they could
No,
hit.
but that's the point. Okay, so a cyclist that collides with a pedestrian will always come off worse, because you're going to be thrown. The pedestrian's falling the 5 or 6 foot that they measure. That's it. That's all they have to do.
Well, I'll give the worst case scenario, Oli. You could hit an old woman.
About once.
Knock her down.
Absolutely, and once every 5 to 10 years, that does happen. But there are 2 people a week killed on Bogota roads, and that's down 50% on last year because of the pandemic. Last year you're looking at 4 deaths a week in Bogota on the roads.
Okay.
If that doesn't shock you, then frankly I'm a little bit worried. But coming back to your other point, I mean, look, cyclists jump red lights. As a cyclist, I've jumped red lights many a time, and I would strongly encourage many cyclists to do so, because jumping a red light often puts you in a safer position. It's very often the case that you can see clearly that you're not going to impact other people. Now, I absolutely think that cyclists should never, ever be forcing a pedestrian to do anything they would not otherwise do. You should never force them to slow down. You should never force them to stop. You should never force them to be worried. However, I mean, and for example, on Sunday I was walking my dogs in the park, and as we came back, it was the ciclovia, and I was walking across on my green gender non-binary person, and Claudia has got that in line, to be fair, and a cyclist came jumping across the red light close enough that I had to pull my dogs back, and close enough that I could kick their back wheel, which I did very hard and got a bit of verbal abuse. And I said, do you want to go and talk to police? Because I'm happy to go and talk to the police standing right there. But if you're close enough for me to kick you, that's your mistake, fundamentally. I've jumped red lights. I would never have gone close enough to a pedestrian in my life to have been able for them to kick me.
The other issue about stopping at red lights or moving on when it's safe to do so is that a cyclist parked up is at risk of the bike being stolen, I guess.
Well, yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, this is, I think, one of the biggest shocks for people. And I do want to give a bit of a shout out. I'm not always a fan of his work, but Joe Parkin Daniels' article on cycling in Bogota, the capital of death, flashy headline, but absolutely merited. And I thought it was a good article, and I thought it was well balanced. And I think one of the things foreigners often don't realize about bicycle crime in Bogota is the difference in method. So in London or Dublin, you expect bicycle theft to be the issue. You expect it to be, you've locked up your bike, somebody comes along with a portable angle grinder, bash straight through the railing, bike into a stolen van, and they'll take off the lock, many hours later at a warehouse. That's not what happens in Bogota. In Bogota, you're cycling along a road or a bicycle lane, and a bunch of guys jump out. And let's be honest, it is guys. I mean, we're using masculine, with good reason there. They jump out with guns or with knives, and they say, give me your bicycle, I would like to have your bicycle. And also your wallet and your phone and everything else along with it.
But does it happen that frequently in the actual city? Because I can imagine this happening when you start going up the cycle routes on the mountains. El Codito, which is close to me here, I know would be higher risk. But on Septima, for example, or on Novena or Le Trece.
No, okay, so you're probably okay on Novena, Trece. You're talking about massive footfalls of pedestrians. You're talking about busy roads. Yeah, okay. It tends to be cycle lanes, which is one of the reasons a lot of cyclists don't use cycle lanes, which they're often, again, criticised for doing so. It's one of the reasons also that bicycle lanes are often in the middle of roads here. But I mean, you can even see if you're going to the airport on the 26 Transmilenio, where the bicycle lane that kind of goes through the Transmilenio tracks or through the stations, fairly often you'll see groups of youths hanging around at the entrance to the tunnel. There are plenty of people who just won't cycle over a bridge or walk over a bridge in Bogotá because of that method of attack. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
But does it happen? Does it happen in the city? Go to any of the Facebook groups like Bicicletas Robadas de Bogotá, something like that. You guaranteed you'll see a whole bunch of incidents within minutes of joining the group.
Just kind of maybe to talk about the positive side of things a little more, like you mentioned the cycle lanes now, and that one of the positives with the pandemic. I mean, Bogotá always claimed that it was a cyclist-friendly city, but you could say it's even more so now because of the pandemic. They've put in a permanent one right down Novena, because it used to be on the footpath, which was an absolute disaster. As you say, like they painted the footpath. That's effectively all they did. But this one now that goes down Novena from 170 all the way down to about 116 or whatever, and I've used it. I used it coming back up north today, and I think it works fairly fine, and it's nicely leveled. There are no big holes in it. Few puddles after the rain today, which they could try and sort out. Doesn't make it that nice to cycle on. But I couldn't help but thinking when I was going down on Septima that maybe the motorists were kind of going, so isn't there a cycle lane now on Novena that he could be using? Why is he on the Septima?
Oh yeah, absolutely. That's good. And you might well argue, because I'm not going to somewhere on Novena. Yes, I think the Septima cycle lane, the Novena cycle lane, and a lot of the sort of recent improvements by Peñalosa in the last 4 years, to give him his due there. Those were, good cycle infrastructure, good, solid, for the large part. They're definitely not perfect. I have my misgivings about some things. I don't like the fact that the Septima cycle lane is in the middle of the road. I don't think that's helpful. It makes it difficult to get out of it. It encourages people essentially to cycle on the pavement, because if you're going to an address that's in the middle of the block, well, how are you going to get out of that cycle lane? How do you get into the cycle lane if you join from a side road? There's a lot of questions like that. So I don't think that's perfect.
Sorry, Alex, can you not just go to the next traffic lights where there's a pedestrian?
Oh yeah, no, you can. But then you've got to go, and loop back on yourself. Yeah, you could do that, but then people will end up cycling on the pavement, because you could walk along pushing your bike, but on the other hand, it's easier just to stay on.
Yeah, but there's nothing ideal. Because what would be the best practice? Like kind of, the city authorities might go, but what do you want us to do then?
Oh, okay. Well, put it on the opposite carril. Put it on the curbside carril. That's not. Okay. That would create clashes with buses potentially. mixed bicycle bus lanes do work in most cities around the world. I can see the reason why you wouldn't want them in Bogotá, because of the way buses operate. But this comes back to another point. Get rid of the little buses. Just get SETP Provisional. Get rid of them. They've outstayed their welcome. Look, they were meant to have gone, 4 or 5 years ago now. So
I think I wrote a blog story about 8 years ago when it was announced, when Petro was mayor or whatever, that they were.
But they're an anachronism. Again, it's this thing. Bogotá really, I think, in many ways, it's coming to the situation where it has to start deciding, do we want to get richer and be a developed country and move towards being a developed country, or do we not? Do we want to stay with the benefits that we've got through not developing? And that comes to all kinds of things. Rich people are going to have to start addressing inequality if they want to get the wider benefits of being a developed country.
But Ali, anyway, but those provisional buses, in fairness, the proper ones, the blue and orange ones, like the official city buses, they're not much better either, though, at their driving.
No, but at least I know where they're going to stop. I do at least know whether they'll stop at a stop.
Well, in fairness, on my little cycle down today, I must have met, okay, it might have had something to do with the weather, but there were about 3 or 4 different blue buses just parked up away from a bus stop at different stages on the route, which meant I had to go out to compete with the traffic. But there you go. Yeah. No,
absolutely. No, I fully understand that. And again, I would always in Bogotá, I would always advise people to ride aggressively, ride as aggressively as possible. Defensive riding gets you not very far in Bogotá. But yeah, no, I mean, I think there are major positives. I do think that there's a lot of good cycle infrastructure, even if there are, things that could be made better. I mean, look, the way to make cycling better in Bogotá and to make it more attractive, it's not rocket science, Brendan. It's not. We don't need new laws. We don't even need a great deal of new infrastructure. What we need is just put police on the cycling lanes. Get them out there. Get them out there, get them at bridges and tunnels and say, yeah, look, if we see some youths knocking around with knives, we're going to go and stop them.
Yeah, and if there are more police in operation, as we think there are, as we were talking about earlier, well then, use them in the appropriate places, in places where they're going to be at most beneficial to all of us. Just quickly, because I know we're coming up to the hour here, but the do's and don'ts of buying a bike for those who might be interested in it, haven't yet here in Bogotá.
Get to one of the bike zones. Avoid any of the shops that look like they're all selling the same stuff. They're probably going to be basically people that could be selling anything, and it just happens to be bicycles. Cheap frames break surprisingly fast. A heavy bike isn't a bad thing in Bogotá. Helps you run straight through potholes, which is very useful. Do try and avoid be a bit careful with second-hand bikes. There are some good deals out there. Check the provenance of it. I would avoid at all costs the pawn shops. Those are well known as places to fence stolen bicycles.
Okay, the pawn shops there, just
not pornography, porn.
Yeah. Something else came into my mind there.
Now, if you're looking for bicycle-related pornography, stay on the chat afterwards, Brendan. I'll drop you some URLs.
It's X-rated stuff. And quickly, because I know this came in a few years ago, but I don't know how much it's enforced. Because as I said, I acquired a bike and I don't have. Now, when I say it's from a friend who's no longer here. But I don't have the paper. Sorry, no longer in the country. That sounds bad. But I don't have the paperwork with it. So, there is this kind of fear that the police could stop me and kind of go, have you got the paperwork to prove it's your bike? Is that something to be concerned about?
Not really.
Okay. I think we're just about done for time here, Oli. So next week, we're always our news roundup, and what's in store for us?
Well, let's look at what's in a name. The wonderful world of Colombian names, how they're different from names back home, the whole double, treble naming things, names that are difficult to pronounce for us, names that Colombians often find difficult to pronounce. I'm sure you've more than a few Irish friends with tricky names. Things like that.
And I'll just say Medinusa, which if you spell that out is Made in USA. Wonderful name.
Brilliant stuff.
Yeah. Okay, until next week, guys. Thanks for watching, I should say, rather than listening. And we'll see you hoy en ocho.
Bye-bye. Not sure if Soft Morrow's picked up that we're ending the broadcast.
Our producer.
So I guess we're going to go on a little bit more.
Yeah, Soft Morrow, hello there. Well, anyway.
Well, you know, what can we do but wait? I guess, you know, it's time for him to get on his bike.
One thing we didn't talk about, by the way, is cycling in the rain here. November rain that we've got now. Yesterday was a terrible day for cycling.
Just wait. I mean, in most cases, Brendan, just sit, just get off your bicycle, go and hide under a roof or something. Just wait. You know, Bogotá rain is fierce, but it doesn't generally last for very long. And this is a dry, wet season. Anyway,
yeah, it actually,
I remember
today was pretty decent.
Woo!
I thought.
Do you remember? No, it threatened a lot, didn't it? But it didn't come up. 2012. Do you remember that year? Bloody hell! It's the only time I genuinely, not a word of a lie, I rode into a puddle and it was higher than the hub of my front wheel. Forced me to stop. I was forced to get off because my gears were underwater.
Yeah, well, anyway, Ali, I think our producer has just told us now he's woken up from his little sleep there. So that's for the second time, guys. We'll talk to you in a week. Bye-bye.
Or not.